Premature and lost children. The magical meaning. What does a child lose if it is born before 9 months? It loses a certain period of time, which it will have to spend in real life fighting to compensate for its underdeveloped state. And what could be the reason for this? Are these personal lessons for the child or lessons for the parents? No, it is usually the result of external interference. As a rule, children who are born at 7 or 6 months are those who are meant to accomplish something in this world. They have a specific task. The system identifies them quite quickly. These children, let's say, are difficult to predict. They are hard to calculate. Therefore, it becomes necessary either to eliminate them before birth or to ensure they are born with an underdeveloped consciousness, allowing the system to further develop them according to its needs. And naturally, that is exactly what it does. Up to a certain point, these children are highly systemic, extremely systemic. If they have enough strength to break free from the system, then they later recover what they lacked. But if they do not have the strength, then, as a rule, their lives go downhill. That means that 7-month, 6-month, and generally premature babies tend to be either exceptionally gifted or completely ungifted. There is no in-between. Are you asking about your own children? I just want to understand better, because I was also born prematurely. Well, everything is in your hands. Premature children often carry a psychological sense of inferiority compared to others. The very first thing they try to do is to gain approval from those around them. Typically, developing these qualities takes a considerable amount of time, precious time, and by the time they begin to realize who they are, all the others, who were born on the same path, in the same channel, but carried to full term, have already moved far ahead, and you are left trying to catch up, to make up for lost time, because those 2 premature months in the womb later turn into 20 years of life spent on complete nonsense. However, the catching up process then begins to accelerate. It begins to progress in great leaps. And what about children who were not carried to term? Miscarriages? What is the reason behind that? Is it the karma of the parents, or is the child paying for something from a past life? It could be anything, but first and foremost, it's a problem of the bloodline. For example, the bloodline, whether the mother's or the father's, might be a small, weak, and very vulnerable structure. A woman carries a child, carries it up to a certain point, and within that child lies a program indicating that this future child, belongs to a bloodline that is not strong. But there are more people in that bloodline than just that man and woman. There are others. And it may so happen that another woman from that bloodline, from either side, also wishes to have a child. But all the cells in the bloodline are already occupied. They are already filled with people. So, in order for that woman to have a child, a space must be made available. She performs certain magical actions to free a place in her bloodline for her child. As a result, she summons certain forces, which the bloodline cannot resist. It must submit. The bloodline is a dependent program. Faced with the threat of total destruction, the bloodline must remove one of its members. And if, let's say, all the other members are valuable to it, if there's no elderly person to get rid of, then it turns to those who are still unborn. The bloodline would rather get rid of an underdeveloped child than sacrifice a living member. It protects its own. And believe me, to the bloodline, unlike the system, a living, already born member is more valuable than an infant. You mean an unborn baby? Or even one that's already been born? That is precisely why infant mortality used to be so high. It is no coincidence that in the old days, there was a custom For example, the father would not take the child in his arms or give it a name until a certain amount of time had passed. The purpose of this was to avoid becoming attached to the child because infant mortality was very high. If the child survived that first critical year with all the illnesses, when all children fall ill with all sorts of things, then it became clear that the child had made it, and only then could one begin to form an attachment, to invest in them, to pass on the power of the bloodline. That was when the father accepted the child. Before that, the child might not even be given a proper name, just a nickname. We had a regulation as well, that as soon as twins were born, housing was to be allocated immediately. But there was also a hidden regulation, to wait a year before granting anything. Yes, to wait a year, because mortality was high. Why waste the resource? And although we are speaking of housing, the naming of a child is directly connected to it. It is all linked to our old traditions. The further back you go, the stranger they become. Even if the bloodline is strong, even if it is powerful, if the soul incarnating in this world could potentially pose a threat, a revolution or a coup, then the system will try to eliminate the child from the very beginning. In other words, it will try to prevent them from being born at all. It will pressure the mother into having an abortion. It will bring illnesses upon her, because a woman is vulnerable. She might catch something like chickenpox or things like that, and that's it. So, the system will put pressure on the woman first and foremost. She bears double responsibility for the entire process. When I read online that a woman gave birth half an hour after finding out she was pregnant, I'm honestly shocked. Who exactly is she carrying? There was a story about a very overweight American woman who did not know she was pregnant. She thought she was simply putting on weight, as she went to McDonald's every day, and her periods had stopped for the same reason. She kept going there, and suddenly she felt stomach pains. An ambulance was called to that very McDonald's, and the doctors said, "Ma'am, you're in labor, you're about to give birth." The mother couldn't believe it. "What do you mean? Are you out of your mind?" Clearly something's going to be wrong with this child. And to be honest, something was probably wrong with the mother too. So yes, a child can be destroyed at that level. It could be some kind of systemic conflict. For example, a woman is carrying a child, but she herself, or her husband, or her family, or her bloodline has entered the field of destiny. I'll explain what that is when we study the fourth main course. And in such cases, if the child is needed, or if the mother is really needed, then the forces that brought them here will remove them from the field of destiny. But if it's just a child with no special significance, born here merely as biomass, then the attitude towards it will reflect that. Every case is different. One must always look at the individual case, who the woman is carrying, what the bloodline conflict is, and so on.